grab a cup of coffee and saddle up, my partners, because we are trimming a brisket. Now, I am no expert, but I have trimmed a lot of briskets. So I'm just going to kind of walk you guys through my process here, like what I like to do. First, I start on the edges and I trim all the way around, getting that gray meat off there. Now, a brisket is expensive, but so is 20 plus hours of my time cooking this thing. So I'm not going to leave any trash on the brisket. We're going to make the best brisket possible. Like, that's the whole point here. And I know there's going to be a dude down in the comments who's like, I've cooked brisket for 69 years at my barbecue restaurant, blah, 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 and you're doing it wrong. Well, you know what, dude? Great. Happy for you. So, after trimming up the edges, we're going to take off all these little caps of fat that are all around the brisket. These are just pockets of fat that is going to prevent seasoning from actually getting down to the brisket. There's a huge fat cap on the other side. All of this fat is wildly unnecessary. It's not intramuscular fat. It's intermuscular fat, which is the fat between muscles, not the fat inside of the muscles. That fat inside of the muscles is the good. As you can see, like on this cut here, you see all that fat speckled inside of the point. That's the good fat. That's the fat that renders out and makes it super tender. The fat cap around the outside is used to help to protect the meat while we're cooking it. But we need that fat layer to be even. So we're going to round off all the edges. We're going to make this brisket as aerodynamic as possible. That way, when we put it in the smoker, smoke can flow over and around it and really cook this very, very evenly. The brisket, if you're not aware of this, it's actually two separate muscles. It's the external and the internal pectoral. So it's the cow boob. We're cooking cow boobs here. So one side is flat and lean, and the other side is thick and fatty. And then, of course, you have crap like this sticking off of it. So we're going to cut all that off because that is the opposite of aerodynamic. Being that it's two muscles, it's very difficult to cook this all together. It's an imperfect cook, but it comes out to an amazing piece of meat when it's done. That's really the point of trimming here, is to make this as even as possible. That way, your cook goes as smooth as possible. What we're really doing is trying to avoid potential pitfalls during the cook process here. And as you can see, that fat cap is huge on there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim that down just a little bit. Most people will tell you about 1/4 inch is good, a good fat cap on the flat there. And the reason for that is it's going to protect the meat plenty. And then when you go to slice this later on, you have just a nice little cap of fat on there, because that cap's not going to go away. That fat's not going to go away. It's going to be there forever, when you go to serve it. So you don't want to serve brisket slices that has, an inch of fat around it. Like, that would not be the best, So going to just continue to cut on this. Now, you can see that big old huge chunk of fat on the left side there. That is the decal. That's the fat that runs between the flat, the thinner part, and the point, the big thick part. And what I'm going to do at the end here is just kind of carve some of that out there, because that stuff is not going to render. And that's it. That is my fully trimmed brisket. Give it a try. Have a good one. Cheers, y'all. And we cook. Time to get that freshly trimmed brisket onto the smoker. I'm just going to kind of talk through this whole cook with you guys, give you guys my thoughts and how I like to approach this. We're going to start with a hot sauce binder. If this is not something you've done before, I'd highly recommend it. Hot sauce adds a great little layer of flavor in there, and today I'm using truff. Now go ahead and use your favorite. I like the truff one. It has a really cool flavor to it, and this is their hotter version. Don't be afraid of going too spicy on the outside of this, because remember, this is a big honking piece of meat. A lot of flavor can get in there. It can handle a lot of rub and a lot of seasoning and a lot of binder on there. So really work it in. And then we're going to get a layer of seasoning on there. We're using Lane's Scorpion Rub. This is a mixture of their brisket rub and a few other things. It's meant specifically for steaks, and so it's great with beef. And I'm doing this seasoning the night before, about 6 hours before. I'm actually going to put this on the smoker. I'm just going to wrap it up and put it back in the fridge once I'm done seasoning. This is a great thing to do if you are getting up super early in the morning. You don't want to trim and season your brisket at like 3 a.m. Do it the night before, let it hang out in the fridge. Getting the Kamado going, we're going to be using that. This is a direct heat from the bottom, so we're going to use deflector plates. I like to cover those in tinfoil, but leave the bottom open. That way they can stay nice and clean. And then we're going to use a water pan. This is going to have a nice gentle heat, so we can really push this as a long cook, getting those grates in there over that. And I actually refilled the water about 10 hours into the cook just to keep it going. Getting the brisket on there. And like I said, I'm doing an overnight cook on this one. So it's going to go for about 10, 12 hours. Got that meter probe in. And the meter is super cool because you can actually set alerts for it. So I have a high temperature alert, a low temperature alert. So I can go to bed and be fully comfortable that this thing is going to be good. We're about 10, 12 hours later, 170 degrees internal, and we're going to do a butcher paper wrap. I like to do a little bit of beef tallow on the bottom, get the brisket in there, and a little more beef tallow on top. This really just allows that, this tallow has already been rendered, so it allows it to kind of soak into the meat, and I've always had really good results using beef tallow during my wrap. Now, my wrap method, I like to use what's called the boat method. So we're going to do a layer of butcher paper. That allows it to keep some of the moisture in, but it does allow it to breathe a little bit. Underneath the butcher paper, I do what's called the boat method. So I do a tinfoil boat on the bottom, and what that does, it keeps moisture from leaking out the bottom, but if there's too much in there, it can still evaporate out the top. Again, getting that meter probe back in there to monitor it and back into the smoker. Now, one thing about a Kamado style smoker is mine particularly, the left side is hotter than the right side, so I always point the point towards that hotter side because it's thicker and takes longer to cook, and the center flat goes on the slightly cooler side of the grill. Now, I will say, I think I overcooked this a little bit. It's a little bit too tender. You can kind of see where it tore right there, but let's get a look at that cross shot real quick. Super nice and juicy. This is absolutely what I want to see. Now, this point, or this flat here, did definitely overcook a little bit. It's fallen apart. It's a little bit too tender. You're going to see here with this pull method here. It's not so tender that it's going to fall apart in the bend test, but it's just going to pull right apart there. And I will say there are worse things in this world than a too tender brisket. You just want to make sure you baby it. I had that water pan in there, and I had that tallow in there, so it's nice and juicy, and that's exactly what you want to see. All right, cheers, y'all.